It's become increasingly clear to me, after decades of studying the human mind, that many people live their lives like chess pieces moving across a board they don't even know exists. Imagine this. You're having a conversation that seems perfectly normal. The other person's tone is calm, even caring, maybe with a soft smile. But something in you starts to feel uneasy. Your instincts whisper warnings, your rational mind scrambles to explain it away. And then, suddenly, you realize you've been pulled into a psychological trap. You've been manipulated. Now here's the part that might shock you. These tactics aren't random or spontaneous. They follow patterns, ancient ones, what I call archetypal shadows, deep-rooted psychological mechanisms that certain individuals use to invade your inner world and bend your reality to fit their desires. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share could save you years of confusion, self-blame, and psychological pain. I've often said that everything that irritates us about others can lead to a better understanding of ourselves. But here's what I rarely reveal publicly. Manipulators weaponize that very truth. They take your self-awareness and twist it into a weapon you unknowingly turn against yourself. In the next few minutes, I'll expose what I've identified as the 5 most dangerous psychological questions. Phrases that manipulators use to twist your perception. More importantly, I'll show you exactly how to spot them and reverse their power. By the end, you'll possess something I call conscious realization, the ability to see through manipulation before it even starts. But a warning. Once you learn to recognize these patterns, you'll start seeing them everywhere, in friends, family, co-workers, even strangers. You'll begin to notice how people try to access your psychological back doors. And for some, that realization is deeply unsettling. So ask yourself, are you ready to see the matrix of manipulation? If you are, let's step into the shadow. Question 1. Why are you being so sensitive? Before we unpack this first manipulative weapon, let me ask you something that might sting a bit. How many times have you been told you're too sensitive, and almost always right after you've pointed out something that felt off? If a specific moment flashes in your mind, you've already experienced what I call shadow projection. Here's what most people never realize. Manipulators instinctively use something I've named psychological invalidation. They don't go after your point. They go after your right to feel anything about it. According to my research, sensitivity is not weakness. It's your unconscious mind picking up on contradictions, lies, or emotional dissonance before your conscious mind can explain them. I once wrote, your vision becomes clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. Manipulators understand this better than most. They know that sensitive people are usually the most perceptive. They pick up on subtle lies, shifts in energy, and tiny facial cues others miss. So instead of hiding better, manipulators learn to weaponize your sensitivity against you. Think about it. The financial analyst who notices irregularities in the books, dismissed as paranoid, until she uncovers fraud. The wife who senses her husband's distant behavior, branded insecure, until she finds proof of betrayal. The employee who questions sketchy decisions, labeled difficult, until the company scandal hits. I call this the persecution of the perceptive. When someone attacks your sensitivity, what they're really saying is, stop using your radar. It's detecting something I don't want you to see. But here's the twist. I found a counterattack that stops this manipulation cold. I call it the conscious assertion of shadow integration. The next time someone says, why are you being so sensitive? Don't defend, don't explain, don't apologize. Simply meet their gaze and say, I'm not being sensitive, I'm being perceptive. And then, pause. Let the silence do the work. In my experience, manipulators will react in one of 3 ways. Anger, their mask slips and their hostility surfaces. Deflection, they quickly change the topic, confirming your intuition. Overcompensation, they suddenly act sweet, scrambling to regain control. That's your proof. You've just disrupted their psychological script, but the next question, the second weapon, is even more dangerous. Question 2. Do you trust me? Stop whatever you're doing and listen closely, because this discovery changed everything I knew about trust. Here's the truth. Genuine trust operates unconsciously, while demanded trust operates from the ego. And that means one critical thing. People who demand trust are often the least trustworthy. I've said before that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But manipulators don't want transformation. They want domination. When someone says, "You trust me, right?" they're not seeking reassurance. They're issuing a psychological ultimatum disguised as closeness. Here's what happens inside you when they say this. Your conscious mind wants to be a good person, someone who believes in others. But your unconscious mind is waving red flags. This internal clash is what I call the loyalty conflict complex. The manipulator depends on that split, on your desire to be kind colliding with your intuition that something's wrong. Now here's what I observed in my clinical work. Trustworthy people never have to ask for trust. They show it through what I call consistent psychological congruence. Their words, actions, and energy all match. Manipulators, on the other hand, fake that alignment just long enough to earn unearned confidence. Picture this: a business partner who refuses to show you the financials but says, "You trust me, right?" A partner who hides their phone, gets defensive and says, "Don't you trust me?" This is what I call trust as a weapon. It's not about connection. It's about shutting down your critical thinking through guilt. In my analysis, this tactic bypasses your logic and activates your guilt complex. It's not an invitation to bond. It's a demand to ignore your own intuition. So how do you stop it? Use what I call conscious detachment. When someone asks, "You trust me, right?" Pause. Take a breath. Look them calmly in the eye and respond. Trust is earned through consistency, not questions. Are you asking me to ignore my intuition? If the person is genuinely trustworthy, they'll respect that and keep showing reliability through action. But if they're manipulative, they'll get defensive, change the subject, or try to guilt trip you for being suspicious. Each of those reactions exposes them, but we're just getting started. The third question, the next weapon, is darker still. Question 3. Are you accusing me of something? Now we're entering truly dangerous territory. This is where manipulation turns from subtle to surgical. Before I explain this one, I want to warn you. Master manipulators don't just lie, they reshape reality. This question is a psychological mirror trick I call the reversal technique. It flips the spotlight, turning the investigator into the accused. Here's how it works. Let's say you notice something suspicious, a contradiction, an inconsistency, and you ask about it. The manipulator immediately goes on the attack. Wait, are you accusing me of something? In that instant, the entire dynamic reverses. Suddenly, you're on the defensive. You find yourself clarifying, justifying, even apologizing for noticing something real. I wrote long ago that projection is one of the commonest psychic phenomena. Everything that is unconscious in ourselves we discover in our neighbor, and we treat him accordingly. Manipulators exploit this truth by taking their own guilt, projecting it onto you, and then punishing you for it. It's psychological warfare wrapped in false innocence. Take this example. You notice financial irregularities at work and calmly ask your boss about them. Instead of answering, they snap, "Are you accusing me of something?" Suddenly, you're explaining yourself, insisting you meant no offense, maybe even apologizing. You've just fallen into what I call the guilt transfer complex. This question triggers what I term responsibility reversal. Instead of them explaining their suspicious actions, you're explaining why you dared to notice. But here's the breakthrough. The real power isn't in their question, it's in your silence. Manipulators expect panic, rushed explanations, desperate backtracking. They don't know what to do when you stay calm. So when someone snaps, "Are you accusing me of something?" Don't answer right away. Use what I call the therapeutic pause. Hold their gaze. Count a few seconds. Then quietly say, "Should I be?" 3 simple words, but they carry what I call conscious power. Because innocent people don't fear questions. Only guilty people do. That calm, measured response forces the manipulator to confront their own shadow instead of hiding behind yours. And that's when the power dynamic flips. Question 4. Would I ever lie to you? What I'm about to share may completely change the way you see your relationships. This question, "Would I ever lie to you?" sounds innocent, even loving. But through years of research, I discovered something chilling. The question itself is already a lie, not because of the words, but because of the intention hiding behind them. You see, this isn't a real question. It's a psychological trap. According to my research on what I call persona manipulation, this phrase isn't designed to get an answer. It's meant to create an emotional debt. The manipulator is trying to make you feel guilty for doubting them, even when every fiber of your intuition screams that something is off. I once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But manipulators twist that privilege into a weapon. They make you feel like you're a bad person for being observant, intuitive, or cautious. For simply being yourself. And here's the truly twisted part. I found that the people who ask, "Would I ever lie to you?" are often making an unconscious confession through overcompensation. They're revealing more than they realize. Look for this pattern. The partner who hides their phone but looks wounded when you question them. "Would I ever lie to you?" The business associate who dodges accountability but sighs dramatically. "Come on, would I really deceive you?" This isn't sincerity. It's what I call a performance of innocence. It's emotional theater designed to short-circuit your rational thinking and drown you in guilt. In my depth psychology, genuine honesty doesn't perform, it simply exists. Honest people don't need to convince you they're incapable of lying. Their behavior creates what I call unconscious trust. You feel safe without being persuaded. But manipulators counterfeit that safety. They use tears, hurt tones, and expressions of betrayal to make you stop questioning. It's all part of what I call the guilt complex activation. A tactic meant to replace your logical evaluation with emotional confusion. So how do you break free? Apply what I call conscious questioning. When someone asks, "Would I ever lie to you?" don't answer. Don't rush to reassure. Instead, pause, breathe, and calmly reply. That's not the right question. The real question is, would I know if you did? That single sentence flips the entire power dynamic. You've taken their false narrative and replaced it with awareness. Liars survive in fog. They crumble in clarity. Your response shines what I call the light of consciousness. And when that light turns on, the shadow has nowhere to hide. Question 5. Can't we just move on? And now we arrive at the manipulator's final weapon, their nuclear option. At first, this question sounds peaceful. It's calm, even mature. Can't we just move on? But don't be fooled. This is often the manipulator's last resort, what I call forced forgetting. When denial, distraction, and guilt all fail, they reach for this tool. The demand that you trade truth for the illusion of peace. Here's what I discovered that most people miss. There is no real healing without confrontation. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. When manipulators say, "Let's not dwell on the past," what they mean is, "I don't want to take responsibility for what happened." It's a plea not for forgiveness, but for amnesia. Think of how often you've seen this play out. The company caught in a scandal says, "Let's focus on the future." The unfaithful partner pleads, "Why keep talking about it? We need to move forward." But these are not requests for healing. They are demands for silence. I call this psychological burial, the act of shoving truth into the unconscious where it can't threaten their control. In my analytical psychology, I've found that true healing only happens when the unconscious becomes conscious. Manipulators work in the opposite direction. They want to push everything back into darkness where they can continue controlling the narrative. Here's the pattern they use over and over. Deny there's a problem. Minimize the issue if denial fails. Blame you for noticing. And finally exhaust you until you give up searching for the truth. This final step is what I call emotional erosion. By the time they say, "Can't we just move on?" you're drained, confused, and desperate for peace. That's when they win, if you let them. But there's an antidote. I call it conscious anchoring. When someone tries to rush your healing with, "Can't we just move on?" take a slow breath and respond, "I'll move on when I understand what happened, not before." That one sentence reclaims your power. It tells them that your peace cannot be forced, bought, or manipulated. You're anchoring your healing in truth, not avoidance. I wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Manipulators depend on your fatigue. They hope you'll confuse exhaustion with resolution. But the moment you refuse to move on prematurely, you end the cycle. Because clarity, not denial, is what sets you free. The manipulator's fatal weakness, now that you know the 5 psychological weapons: the sensitivity attack, the trust demand, the accusation reversal, the innocence performance, and the forced forgetting. It's time to talk about defense. Through decades of study, I discovered that manipulators have one fatal weakness. They need your emotional reaction to survive. They feed on your guilt, anger, confusion, and fear. If you take that away, their entire psychological system collapses. I call this conscious detachment, the ability to observe without being consumed. In my work on what I term individuation, the process of becoming psychologically whole, I found that the manipulator's greatest fear is someone who cannot be destabilized. Here's what I teach my patients. When you stay calm while others lose control, when you stay clear while others create confusion, when you remain grounded while others try to shake your reality, you become what I call psychologically sovereign, and sovereignty cannot be manipulated. I once wrote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." Manipulators want the opposite for you. They want you defined by reaction, confused, guilty, and compliant. But the moment you act from choice instead of reaction, you break their spell. So before you respond to any manipulative question, pause and ask yourself the consciousness question. Is this reaction coming from my authentic self, or from a complex they're trying to activate? Because manipulators don't target your true self. They target your wounds, they push your buttons, they trigger what I call the not good enough complex, the guilt complex, the need to please complex. But your authentic self, the centered self, is beyond their reach. When you respond from that place, you become untouchable. Here's a powerful exercise. When you sense manipulation, take what I call the conscious pause. Breathe. Feel your feet grounded beneath you. Connect with your authentic self. Then respond. Not from the wounded parts they're trying to provoke, but from your centered awareness. That single act transforms every conversation. This is what I meant when I wrote, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." Manipulators want you dreaming, lost inside their narrative. But consciousness is the great awakener. And once you're awake, you can never be controlled again, the hidden gift of manipulation. Here's something few people realize. Every encounter with manipulation is also an invitation to awaken. I call this shadow work, the process of becoming stronger by understanding darkness. I wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Every manipulator who tries to deceive you is unintentionally showing you where your boundaries are weak. Every lie teaches you to recognize truth faster. Every attempt to control you strengthens your clarity. Through this process, you develop what I call conscious discrimination, the instant ability to separate truth from deception, authenticity from performance, love from control, and once you cultivate that inner clarity, you become dangerous. Not because you attack manipulators, but because you see them. And here's their greatest fear: to be seen. Manipulators are creatures of shadow. They operate in secrecy, distortion, and confusion. But once you shine the light of consciousness on their tactics, they lose all power. They're like vampires in sunlight. They can't survive the presence of awareness. That's why conscious individuals are such a threat to unconscious manipulation. Awareness is liberation, and liberation, once found, can never be undone. Now that you've seen the patterns of psychological manipulation, their language, their tactics, and their emotional blueprints, it's time to step into something deeper. Because all this knowledge, while powerful, becomes true liberation only when it transforms how you live, think, and interact with others. This is your initiation into psychological freedom. The psychology of liberation. I've spent my entire life studying one fundamental question: how do humans become psychologically free? And through decades of observation, therapy, and introspection, I discovered something that changed everything. Freedom is not the absence of challenge. It is consciousness in the presence of challenge. You now possess what I call the seeing eyes. You can spot the 5 manipulative questions. Why are you being so sensitive? The sensitivity attack. Do you trust me? The trust demand. Are you accusing me of something? The accusation reversal. Would I ever lie to you? The innocence performance. Can't we just move on? The forced forgetting. But more than memorizing the questions, you now understand the psychology behind them. The shadow mechanisms, the ego defense structures, the emotional hooks designed to pull you away from your authentic self. I once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But do you know what's even more terrifying? To a manipulator? Someone who has accepted themselves completely, because when you are no longer at war within, no one else can recruit you into a war against yourself. When you've made peace with your sensitivity, they can't use it to shame you. When you no longer crave approval, they can't withhold it to control you. When you're not afraid of conflict, they can't threaten you with abandonment. This is what I call individuation, the process of becoming so psychologically integrated that external manipulation loses all effect. You are no longer a collection of reactive parts that others can push and pull. You are a whole being, conscious, self-aware, and sovereign. And choice becomes your weapon. Choice is the enemy of manipulation. Because manipulators rely on your automatic reactions, your guilt, your fear, your compliance. But when you pause and choose your response, you dissolve their power. The practice of conscious response. Here's your practice, your daily initiation into psychological sovereignty. For the next week, every time someone tries to manipulate you through emotion, whether it's guilt, flattery, or passive aggression, pause and ask yourself one question. What complex in me is this person trying to activate? Are they pressing your need to please complex? Your fear of conflict complex? Your not good enough complex? Once you identify the emotional hook, don't react, just observe it. Breathe, feel your body, connect to your center. This moment of pause, the conscious pause, breaks the manipulator's rhythm. They expect you to rush, to justify, to explain, to panic. When you don't, they lose their grip. Then respond from your conscious self, not from your wounded parts. Speak slowly, stay calm, be direct. You'll notice something extraordinary happen. The manipulative person will either change their behavior around you, realizing they can't play their usual game, or disappear entirely, drawn away like a moth that can no longer find darkness to hide in. Either outcome is a win, because every manipulator who exits your life creates more space for authenticity. The ripple effect of awareness. But your awakening isn't just for you. There's something even more beautiful that happens when you step into consciousness. Your clarity frees others too. When you refuse to participate in manipulation, you unconsciously give everyone around you permission to be genuine. You set a new energetic tone, a field of authenticity where games, lies, and hidden motives can't survive. I've seen it happen countless times. A woman who once felt powerless against her narcissistic partner becomes grounded, calm, and aware. Suddenly, the arguments stop having power. The partner either grows or goes. An employee who used to crumble under guilt tactics learns to stand firm with quiet confidence. Suddenly, workplace manipulators lose interest. They move on to easier targets. You see, when you live in truth, you don't need to fight manipulation. Your presence does the work. Consciousness itself becomes your shield. That's the ultimate victory over manipulation. Not just protecting yourself, but transforming the space around you. You don't merely survive, you elevate. You become what I call a psychological light bringer, a person who carries awareness into every conversation, every relationship, every system. And the moment you walk into a room, others feel the difference. The final revelation. Here's a truth I want you to carry with you. You are no one's psychological victim, not anymore. You are awake. You are conscious, you are free, and in a world still sleepwalking through cycles of projection and manipulation, the awakened become the light. Manipulators fear that light because it exposes the shadows they depend on. But that light is also your greatest protection, because it cannot be faked, and it cannot be destroyed. I'll leave you with a reminder that has guided me through all my years of studying the human psyche. Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. Manipulators build those barriers: fear, guilt, confusion, shame, between you and authentic connection. But now you can see them. You can dismantle them. You can walk through them. What waits on the other side is the life you were meant to live, conscious, grounded, and profoundly free. Integrating the light and the shadow. There's one last thing I want you to understand about manipulation. It's not just something that happens to you. It's something that shows you your own unhealed shadows. Every time someone manipulates you, it reveals a place within you that still longs for approval, validation, or safety. Instead of resenting those experiences, use them as mirrors. Each one reflects a part of you asking to be seen, accepted, and integrated. This is the essence of shadow work, not fighting darkness, but bringing it into awareness. I wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That means your healing doesn't come from avoiding manipulation, but from understanding what it awakens in you. Every manipulative encounter becomes an opportunity to grow stronger, more self-aware, and more centered. Because in the end, manipulation isn't your enemy, it's your teacher. It shows you exactly where to build stronger boundaries, where to reclaim lost power, and where to deepen your awareness. When you see manipulation for what it truly is, a test of consciousness, you stop fearing it. You start learning from it. The path forward from this point forward, I want you to remember this truth. Consciousness is your ultimate protection. Not aggression, not avoidance, not control, just awareness, steady, calm, and clear. Whenever you sense someone trying to manipulate you, don't resist with fear. Observe. Feel the energy of the exchange. Let your awareness track the emotion without judgment. That alone will shift the balance. This is what I call conscious neutrality. It's not detachment through coldness, it's presence without absorption. It means you can see the emotional chaos around you without getting swept away by it. And in that stillness, your power multiplies. You'll begin to see how everything changes when you stop reacting. Manipulators lose their hold. Conversations become more honest. Relationships become more balanced. You start to attract people who thrive in clarity instead of control. Because the truth is, you don't defeat darkness by fighting it. You defeat it by turning on the light. Your closing reminder: walk as I intended, awake, aware, and unshakably yourself. When someone tries to confuse you, stay centered. When someone projects their guilt, stay clear. When someone tries to make you doubt your reality, remember, clarity is your compass. Your mind is no longer a battlefield for other people's agendas. It's sacred ground now, your domain, your sovereignty. And as you walk through life grounded in consciousness, remember this: the shadow's greatest fear is your light. So turn it on, keep it on. Never let anyone convince you to dim it, because once your light is steady, no manipulation can reach you. You'll see every move before it's made, every tactic before it lands, every deception before it takes root. You will not only recognize the game, you'll rise above it. You are no longer a pawn on someone else's chessboard. You are the player, the conscious one, who finally sees the board for what it is. And that, my friend, is what it truly means to be free.